My name is Wills Black. Christmas dinner felt loud and bright in Harrison's dining room. The turkey smelled good and lights on the tree blinked. I sat with my hands folded, watching Julia smile and Noah play with a truck under the table. For years I paid for things at Harrison's house. I fixed the roof. I paid medical bills. I helped send Grant through school. No one thanked me. Before I tell you how I got my revenge, hit that like button and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you'll want to hear how this ends. Harrison told stories and laughed loud. He liked to be the center of the room. I kept quiet because Julia did not want trouble. I told myself it was okay if she and Noah were happy. But my heart felt tired. Halfway through dinner Harrison leaned back and pointed at me with a grin. "How does it feel to be a loser?" he said, and the table burst into laughter. Grant raised his glass and laughed. Julia's face went still. Noah looked up with big eyes and did not smile. Something inside me tightened. I breathed slow and kept my face calm. I would not shout. I would not break. I promised myself I would do something about it, and that promise felt like the first warm light of morning. The morning after Christmas, I walked slowly through my small house. It was quiet, only the ticking of the clock filled the air. My phone buzzed with pictures from dinner, posted online by Harrison's wife. They wrote silly captions about family and laughter, as if the whole night had been perfect. Not one word about me. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the old photograph of my late brother, Henry. He was the strong one, the respected one. People looked up to him. When he passed, I thought I had lost the last person who saw me as more than a burden. Then I remembered something Henry once told me: "Don't worry, Wills. I'll make sure you're taken care of." At the time, I thought it was comfort for a grieving man. But what if he meant more? That afternoon, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. The voice on the other end introduced herself as Ms. Carla Jones, an attorney handling Henry's estate. She wanted to meet me privately. My heart thudded in my chest. For the first time in years, I felt hope flicker. Maybe I was not a loser after all. Love revenge stories? Subscribe now. We drop new ones every week, raw, emotional, and full of justice. Don't miss the next chapter. I met Ms. Carla Jones at her office downtown. The building was tall, glass shining against the gray sky. She shook my hand firmly and guided me into a room filled with files. On the table lay a folder with my name written across the front in bold letters. She spoke clearly, almost formal. "Mr. Black, your brother Henry left behind a detailed will. He trusted me with every word. Before we continue, you need to know, you are not a forgotten man in this document." Her words made me lean forward. She slid the folder toward me. Inside were papers stamped and signed. As she read, my mouth went dry. Henry had left me everything: his company shares, his mansion, his savings, even his classic cars. I blinked, stunned. "All of it?" I whispered. "All of it," she repeated. "Henry wanted you to live with dignity, not depend on anyone else." My hands trembled as I touched the papers. The man Harrison called a loser now owned more than anyone sitting at his table. I walked out of that office taller, the city air sharper and brighter. For the first time, silence felt like power. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lawyer's words replayed in my mind like a steady drumbeat: "All of it is yours." I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking of every insult Harrison had thrown at me. "Loser," he said, in front of Julia and Noah. Yet the truth was now folded neatly in my jacket pocket, proof that I held more than he ever dreamed of. I rose early, brewed black coffee, and sat at the table. I thought about Julia. She had begged me to stay quiet, to ignore Harrison's sharp tongue. She never knew Henry's will existed. Nobody did. My phone buzzed again, messages from Grant bragging about his new watch, bought with my help. I laughed under my breath. Soon he would learn the ground he walked on was not his. I decided not to rush. Revenge would be slow, patient, and silent. That way, when the truth hit, it would strike harder. I folded the papers carefully, placed them in a drawer, and locked it. Harrison thought he broke me at Christmas dinner. But he had no idea I carried the kind of weapon no one could fight, undeniable proof. The next family gathering came quickly. Harrison loved hosting, and he invited everyone again for New Year's Eve. I arrived quietly, carrying a small gift for Noah. The boy's face lit up when I handed him a wooden train set. His smile warmed me, but Harrison ruined the moment. Still wasting money on toys, Wills, he sneered loudly. Maybe if you saved, you wouldn't be stuck in that tiny house. Laughter rippled through the room. Julia shifted uncomfortably, whispering, "Please don't react." I nodded, keeping my promise of silence. But inside, I was calm for a new reason, knowledge. Every joke they made bounced off me because I knew what they didn't. When Harrison bragged about his new car, I pictured the title in Henry's will. When Grant boasted about his future, I thought of the shares in my name. They laughed, thinking they were above me, but I smiled faintly into my glass. Noah climbed onto my lap and whispered, "Grandpa, don't be sad." I kissed his hair and held him close. If only he knew. That night, I walked home under the fireworks, each burst reminding me, their laughter wouldn't last forever. The first week of January, I met Ms. Carla Jones again. Her office smelled faintly of leather and old books. She greeted me with the same firm handshake. "Mr. Black, I want you to understand the scope of this," she said, sliding more documents across the table. I studied the papers carefully. Henry's estate was larger than I thought. Not only the mansion and cars, but also stocks, land, and control over a construction company bearing our family name. "You have full authority," Carla explained. "The will was written with no conditions. Everything is yours." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of it. Years of being mocked as useless now seemed almost laughable. Harrison believed he owned the future, but in truth, he lived inside what was already mine. Carla added, "When you're ready, we can make this public. Until then, the documents stay sealed." I shook her hand again, voice steady. "Not yet. Let them laugh a little longer." Walking out, I felt taller than I had in years. The city lights flickered against the dark sky, and I realized something: my silence wasn't weakness. It was strategy. A week later, Harrison called me to his office. He owned a small finance firm and liked to flaunt his role as provider. I sat across from his polished desk while he leaned back, smirking. "You know, Wills," he said, swirling his glass of whiskey, "it's embarrassing having you around. Julia deserves better. Maybe you should think about moving, somewhere far." I stared at him, unmoving. He mistook my silence for fear. "Don't worry," he added, "I'll keep sending little Noah gifts. Someone has to be a real man in this family." The insult hit hard, but I kept my eyes steady. Inside, I pictured Henry's will tucked safely in my drawer. Harrison's words were sharp, but powerless compared to the truth waiting to surface. As I left, his secretary gave me a pitying smile, as if I truly was beaten. I walked past her calmly, thinking, soon, he'll see who really holds the ground beneath his feet. That night, I sharpened my resolve. Harrison thought I was weak, but I had learned patience from years of silence. Now patience was my greatest weapon. Julia tried to comfort me that weekend. She set tea in front of me and whispered, "Please ignore Harrison. He doesn't mean it." But I could see the strain in her eyes. She wanted peace, but Harrison's voice echoed through every wall. I placed my hand gently on hers. "Don't worry. Time has a way of teaching lessons," I said softly. Later that night, Noah ran to me with a drawing he had made, me standing tall beside him. "You're my hero," he said proudly. My chest tightened. I knew I couldn't let Harrison's poison stain Noah's view of me. Meanwhile, Grant posted pictures online, bragging about the mansion parties and expensive cars, pretending they were his. Friends cheered in the comments, never realizing none of it belonged to him. I scrolled quietly, then shut the phone. Their lies stacked high like glass towers, and I already held the hammer. When Julia asked if I was okay, I simply smiled. "I'm fine." Inside, I burned with determination. Harrison thought he controlled the story, but he didn't know the ending was already written, in my favor. The lawyer, Ms. Carla, called again. "Mr. Black, the documents are in order. The shares and property transfers can be enacted whenever you're ready." I nodded, gripping the phone. "Not yet. I want them blind until the very end." That week, Harrison hosted another dinner. His arrogance grew bolder. Surrounded by wine glasses and laughter, he raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Wills here is still living in that shack. Imagine relying on scraps while others build empires." The table roared with laughter. Julia lowered her head in shame, but I sat still. Every insult added fuel to the fire burning quietly inside me. I lifted my glass and met Harrison's eyes. For the first time, I let a small, knowing smile touch my lips. He frowned, confused by my calmness. They thought I was beaten, but the truth was, every word they spoke only made the victory ahead sweeter. As I left that night, fireworks from a nearby event cracked the sky. Harrison waved dismissively, but I walked taller, the papers in my drawer like a sword I hadn't yet drawn. New Year's Eve arrived. The house overflowed with food, music, and noise. Harrison loved an audience, and tonight he had plenty. I stood quietly in the corner, sipping water, letting his laughter fill the air. Midway through the night, Harrison clinked his glass. "Everyone, a toast," he boomed. "To family, success, and being winners." Then he smirked, eyes fixed on me. "And to Wills, for proving that some people are just born losers." The room exploded in laughter. My jaw tightened, but I didn't move. Julia's eyes glistened. Noah hid behind her skirt. Then the doorbell rang. Harrison, annoyed, waved to a servant. The door opened, and Ms. Carla Jones stepped inside, holding a briefcase. Her presence silenced the room. "Good evening," she said calmly. "I'm here to finalize the reading of Henry Black's will." Forks froze midair. Harrison blinked, his smirk vanishing. I set my glass down gently, my voice steady. "Go ahead, Ms. Jones. Let them hear." For the first time, the room didn't laugh. They waited, hearts pounding, as the truth prepared to speak louder than any insult ever could. The room fell silent as Ms. Carla set her briefcase on the table. Harrison chuckled nervously, trying to regain control. "This must be a mistake. Why bring business into our celebration?" Carla adjusted her glasses. "It's no mistake. Henry Black's will was sealed until now. And tonight, as his closest family is gathered, it's time." Harrison waved a dismissive hand. "Fine, let's get this over with. I'm sure Henry left his wealth to someone who knows what to do with it." His smirk returned, though thinner than before. Carla opened the document, her voice clear. "Henry Black leaves his estate, including the mansion, vehicles, investments, and controlling shares of Black Construction, to his brother, Wills Black." The words echoed through the room like thunder. Forks clattered against plates. Julia gasped. Grant's jaw dropped. Harrison's smirk collapsed. I sat quietly, hands folded, watching their faces. "Impossible!" Harrison shouted, his cheeks burning red. But Carla calmly handed him the stamped, signed papers. "It's not only possible, it's the law." I leaned back in my chair, my silence heavier than any speech I could give. For once, nobody laughed. The shock hung heavy, almost choking. Harrison grabbed the papers, skimming the words with shaking hands. This can't be right. Carla answered evenly, every page is notarized. The court already confirmed it. Mr. Black owns everything. Gasps filled the table. Grant stammered, but, what about us? I finally spoke, my voice calm. You mocked me for years. Called me a loser. Yet the home you sit in, the food you eat, the very business you brag about, all belong to me now. Julia covered her mouth, torn between relief and fear. Noah's eyes widened in pride, as if he understood. Harrison's face twisted. You. A man with nothing. How can you deserve this? I met his glare without blinking. Because Henry trusted me, not you. Every word landed like a hammer. For once, Harrison had no clever reply. His empire of arrogance cracked in front of everyone. The silence in that room was sweeter than applause. Harrison stormed from the table, pacing like a trapped animal. This isn't fair. I built my life, my reputation. Carla interrupted sharply, on borrowed ground. Mr. Black owns the land beneath your feet. Grant whispered, the cars too? Yes, Carla replied. Titles already list Will's Black. I sat still, watching them unravel. Harrison slammed his fist on the table, wine spilling across the cloth. You can't just take everything. I finally stood. My chair scraped the floor softly, but the sound cut deeper than his shouting. I'm not taking anything. It was mine from the beginning. You just never knew. The guests exchanged nervous glances. Some hid smiles, secretly pleased to see Harrison humbled. He shouted again, but his voice trembled now. I turned calmly to Julia and Noah. You will never go without. But Harrison, his laughter ends tonight. Noah smiled faintly, as if sensing the shift in power. Harrison's empire had been built on scorn, and now it collapsed with one document. I had waited years for this silence, and it tasted like justice. The evening spiraled into chaos. Harrison's friends excused themselves quickly, unwilling to watch him crumble. Grant stayed frozen, his pride shattered. Julia whispered, Wills, is this really true? I handed her a copy of the papers. Read for yourself. Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of release. She had carried Harrison's cruelty for too long. Harrison grabbed at the papers, but Carla pulled them back. Touch them again, and I'll call security. You have no authority. His face burned with rage. You set me up, Wills. You've been planning this. I looked him in the eye. No. You set yourself up. Your arrogance blinded you. My silence was not weakness, it was patience. The room grew heavy again, every word sinking like stone. For years, they thought I was powerless. Now, with one will, their world belonged to me. Harrison sank into his chair, sweat on his brow, no laughter left. I turned toward the door, Noah tugging my sleeve. Grandpa, he whispered, you won. Yes, I thought. But this was only the beginning. The following morning, Harrison called me repeatedly. I let the phone ring unanswered. His pride wouldn't let him beg in public, but behind closed doors, he was desperate. At last, I answered. His voice cracked. Wills, listen, we can work something out. You don't need all of it. I leaned back in my chair, phone pressed to my ear. You called me a loser, Harrison. In front of everyone. Why should I give you anything? Because I have a family, he stammered. I paused, then said quietly, so do I. Silence stretched. He had no reply. When the call ended, I walked outside. The winter air bit my skin, but I felt alive. The man who once mocked me now choked on his own pride. I wasn't finished. He needed to feel every ounce of the humiliation he had poured onto me. But I would not shout or strike. I would let the truth dismantle him piece by piece. For once, I walked tall in daylight, no shadow of shame. Harrison's downfall had begun, and I held the strings. The family dinner felt like a trap. Jonathan raised his glass and toasted his victory. His smile dripped with arrogance as he mocked me. "Not everyone is meant to be successful," he said loudly, making the others laugh. My fists tightened under the table, but I stayed calm. Anger was his weapon, silence was mine. I watched him brag about business deals, about how father trusted him alone. They thought I was defeated, sitting quietly, swallowing the insult. But inside, I was building a fire that could never be put out. Every cruel word was fuel. When dinner ended, I excused myself politely. But Jonathan had no idea, I had already begun the steps that would dismantle his false empire brick by brick. The next morning, I visited an old man named Harold Smith. He had been father's closest friend and business partner. When I entered his office, his tired eyes lit up. "Will's Black," he said warmly. "You remind me so much of your father." I told him about Jonathan's betrayal and how the family pushed me aside. Harold sighed deeply. "Your father always wanted you to inherit, not Jonathan." Then he slid a dusty folder across his desk. "This contains documents that may surprise you." My heart pounded as I opened it. There, in black and white, were hidden instructions from my father. Suddenly, Jonathan's castle of lies looked ready to collapse. Inside the folder, I found a shocking discovery. Father had added a secret clause to his will, one Jonathan clearly ignored. It stated that the estate would pass entirely to the child who demonstrated honor, humility, and loyalty. Evidence of Jonathan's arrogance and selfishness could strip him of everything. Harold explained that Jonathan rushed the reading, manipulating lawyers to hide the clause. But Harold had kept a copy, just in case. My blood raced. This was my weapon, not just against Jonathan but against everyone who mocked me. Father hadn't abandoned me. He had trusted me. I looked Harold in the eyes. "It's time I take back what's mine." I couldn't attack Jonathan blindly. I needed strategy. First, I met Cynthia Hale, a sharp lawyer known for taking down powerful men. She listened quietly as I laid out the betrayal, the will, and Harold's documents. Then she smirked. "Jonathan Black thinks he's untouchable. Let's show him otherwise." We built a case brick by brick, gathering proof of Jonathan's fraud and arrogance. I also reconnected with Samantha, my loyal assistant from years ago, who gave me access to files Jonathan thought were destroyed. Every piece of evidence was another nail in his coffin. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just fighting, I was winning. Jonathan strutted into his office the next day, but for the first time, I saw him flinch. Cynthia had filed a petition to contest the will, and the whispers had already begun. Board members exchanged uneasy glances, wondering if they had backed the wrong brother. Jonathan tried to laugh it off, but his voice wavered. He cornered me in the hallway, eyes blazing. "What are you playing at, Wills?" he hissed. I leaned closer, whispering, "I'm just following Father's wishes." "That scares you, doesn't it?" For once, Jonathan didn't have a comeback. His silence told me the truth, his empire was already shaking. Jonathan had the money, but I had something stronger, loyalty. Quietly, I reached out to people he had crushed over the years. Old employees, forgotten partners, even family members he discarded. One by one, they agreed to stand with me. Cynthia guided every move like a general, while Samantha unearthed emails Jonathan thought deleted. Each file proved his greed. Even Ruth, our aunt, confessed Jonathan pressured her into signing documents. The puzzle pieces fit together, revealing his corruption. At night, I stared at the documents and thought of Father's words, honor, humility, loyalty. I was no longer the forgotten son. I was the rightful heir, and soon, everyone would see Jonathan's empire wasn't built on strength, it was built on lies. The courtroom was tense, filled with reporters and board members. Jonathan entered with his usual arrogance, flashing a smug grin. But Cynthia stood tall, armed with evidence. She presented the secret clause in father's will, followed by proof Jonathan had hidden it. Gasps filled the room. Jonathan tried to object, claiming forgery, but Harold testified with undeniable clarity. Then came Samantha, revealing Jonathan's falsified files. The judge listened carefully, his eyes narrowing at Jonathan's excuses. For once, my brother couldn't control the narrative. He sweated under the spotlight, cornered like a rat. As the session ended, Jonathan stumbled out, pale and furious. For the first time, everyone saw him not as a leader, but as a fraud exposed. News spread quickly. Headlines screamed about Jonathan's corruption, painting him as a selfish heir who betrayed his own family. Board members began withdrawing support, investors pulled back, and whispers of criminal charges filled the air. Meanwhile, I stayed silent, letting Cynthia and the evidence speak. That silence cut deeper than any words. Jonathan stormed into my home one night, screaming, "You'll regret this." But I simply looked at him and said, "No, brother. You'll regret betraying me." His rage was hollow now, his threats empty. The empire he built on lies was collapsing piece by piece. And the best part? He was destroying himself without realizing it. Revenge didn't need my fists, it only needed truth. Weeks later, the court delivered its decision. The will was upheld, including the secret clause. Jonathan was stripped of inheritance rights, his fraudulent actions fully exposed. Every asset, properties, accounts, and businesses, was transferred to me. The room fell silent as the judge announced, "Wills Black is the rightful heir." Tears burned my eyes, not from sadness but justice. Father had seen my worth all along. Jonathan's face twisted in disbelief, as if the world betrayed him. But it wasn't betrayal, it was justice. Reporters swarmed, but I spoke calmly, "This is not about wealth. It's about honor." At that moment, I wasn't the quiet brother anymore. I was the man my father raised me to be. Jonathan disappeared from the headlines, a broken man clinging to shadows. His arrogance, once loud, had turned into silence. Meanwhile, I stood in Father's mansion, now mine by right. I walked through the halls, remembering the lessons he whispered, "A man's strength isn't in noise, it's in patience." I rebuilt the estate with fairness, rewarding loyal workers Jonathan once ignored. Cynthia and Samantha remained by my side, allies turned into family. Looking out over the land, I felt no need to gloat. Jonathan's downfall was enough. Revenge hadn't been about destroying him, it was about restoring my name. They called me a loser. But in the end, the will said everything was mine. And that was the perfect justice. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more powerful narratives, and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what part hit you the hardest. Thanks for watching.